Dark Bleatings, everyone. I'm Kaylee from Happy Goat Horror, and today I'm very excited because we're going to start ranking every Stephen King book. I started reading Stephen King when I was 12. My first book of his was The Stand. I fell in love with it. I've been reading him for years, and in the last couple of years I finally finished reading everything that he'd put out. So we're talking novels and short story collections for these rankings. We're going to spread it out over a few videos because there are 77 books on this list. At the time I'm recording, the last book released was Fairy Tale, so we're waiting for Holly, but it's coming out in a few months' time. So yeah, I'm really excited that I finally finished reading them all so that I could start ranking them all. We're just going to go straight into it. I was inspired to do this by Jaime Fuego from the Horror Channel. He has a little series called Hail to Stephen King, and I've just been watching that for years now. Yeah, that's what inspired this, so I'm really excited to do my own one. At number 77, I don't have a copy of this with its own cover because it's in the Bachman books, but it is Roadwork. This just wasn't really up my street as far as stories go. I lean very heavily into Stephen King's horror because that's where I started with him. So when he branches out of it, I tend to just not like those books so much. So that's not like a critique on how he writes anything else, it's just my personal preference. I've basically exclusively just been reading horror since I was a child, and I've recently branched out into fantasy a little bit because of The Dark Tower, and then I thought I should really read more authors. But I'm not a very seasoned reader in any other genre, so maybe my critiques about anything else really isn't fair. But Roadwork was just a bit, I found myself feeling a little bit bored. It's about a man who's either going through a divorce or he's recently divorced, and it looks like he's going to be turfed out of his home as well because people want to buy the land it's on. And I just don't really remember much more about it than that, apart from that my overall memory of the reading experience is very negative because I was ill when I was reading it, and I dozed off and had a weird sleep paralysis nightmare that was terrifying, and it featured stuff from the book which wasn't even scary. So my memory of it is just ugh, I wouldn't want to read it again. But I think maybe that's unfair and I should. But that is the very bottom of the barrel book for me for Stephen King. So next at number 76 we have The Colorado Kid. Once again, not my favourite sort of genre from him. It's part of the Hard Case Crime series. So he has 3 books put out by Hard Case Crime. Not my favourite genre, and this is more of a this is a story of someone telling a story, and I found the ending really unsatisfactory. I think really if you just go in and just accept the book for what it is, you'd have a much better time. I know a lot of people that really enjoyed this one, and it's very, it's svelte for Stephen King. It's not a massive time commitment compared to some of his other books or most of his other books. So it's not, I don't think it's a bad book, it just really wasn't for me, and I probably wouldn't read it again. At number 75 we have The Regulators, which again, I know that's the second Bachman book in the low 3s, but I just didn't click with this, and it's entirely my fault because I read Desperation, and for some reason I thought that this one was a different take on the same story, so maybe from a different character's perspective or something. I'm not sure what I thought, but in any case I was wrong, so I went in with a completely wrong mindset. This is more like a twinner book. There are other worlds than these, as we say. Yeah, so it's kind of like an alternate version of Desperation, but I don't know why it took me so long to realise that while I was reading it. I spent most of my reading time confused, thinking, I just don't remember that character doing that, or I don't remember that mini event unfolding that way. So this is my fault, and I probably do owe it a reread, but I'm just not in a hurry to go back to it right now. Need a little sip of tea, hold on. You really can't talk about books without a cup of tea or a cup of something, surely. So number 74 is Blaze. I know what you're thinking. It's another Richard Bachman book. I do prefer other Richard Bachman books, obviously. They're not all this low ranked. This is sort of Stephen King's take on Of Mice and Men. The 2 characters in here are very like George and Lenny archetypes, but much darker, and the story's much darker. This kind of leans into crime as well. I found it hard to connect to these people, and there is an element of this book which I think is supposed to be a surprise, but I realised it early on, and I think that that kind of like ruined my reading experience a little bit. If I remember correctly as well, I think King said that this might have been like a trunk novel, so like something he had just sitting around for quite a long time, and he like whipped it out when he needed a book. I could be wrong about that, so yeah, don't take my word for it, look it up if you're interested. But it kind of feels like a trunk novel to me. I'm so sorry, Uncle Steve, I love you very dearly. Love all of you, well, I love most of your books, but yeah, this just isn't one I would read again. I would say that if you want to read something like Of Mice and Men, just read Of Mice and Men. Don't bother with Blaze. Number 73. Ugh. It's Dumaki. It was a little bit heavier than I was expecting there. This is about a man who goes to stay in a house, a beach house, I think, if I remember. He's possibly divorcing or separated, or maybe he's just taking some time to himself. I can't really remember. What I do remember is that he has lost an arm, and he gets to this house and he starts painting, and I was so invested for, I'd say, the first third of this book. I just couldn't stop reading it. I was, yeah, it's such a page turner. I was really sorry. I've got like a flyaway hair or something that's poking me in the eye right now. Sorry, I lost my train there. I can't multitask, can you tell? Yeah, I was really invested. I was so interested because obviously in true Stephen King fashion, it's a man alone in a house and then strange things start to happen. And I was so interested. And then midway through the book, I felt like it lost its way a little bit. Or maybe I just had Stephen King fatigue because I was on a binge trying to read all of the Stephen King that I haven't read. And I was just reading King after King after King. So maybe that's what happened. But then by the time I got into the last third of it, I started to feel angry and I just wanted it over. I'm not sure if that's maybe just because I was kind of fed up of Stephen King or something. I can't imagine it though. I don't normally get fed up of Stephen King. But I just lost interest and I just wanted it to end. And the only reason that I didn't DNF it is because I'm a bit of a completionist with these things. I thought, well, I can't very well rank all of the Stephen King if I don't read all of the Stephen King in its entirety. The reason that it's ranked higher than other stuff on this list is because of how much I loved like almost the first half. So I really loved it. So I loved more about this than the other books, despite the fact that I didn't enjoy the back half very much. Maybe I'll go back to it at a later date, when I've cleared some of my unread books off my TBR. Number 72, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. This is the first short story collection on this list. I don't think that this is necessarily bad, but most of the stories in here are forgettable to me. I think I would have to like go through them to refresh my memory of what's even in this collection. And in some of his other collections, you know, there are multiple stories that I could just reel off like 5 or 6 off the top of my head and tell you all about them. But this one, the only one I can remember is Drunken Fireworks, because it's about a really petty neighbour dispute that starts getting out of hand. And if there's one thing I really appreciate, it's just pettiness. It's just so funny to me. When people are doing things to spite themselves out of pettiness to get at someone else. And yeah, Drunken Fireworks is a great story. And I've also listened to the audiobook of that. I'm really sorry, I can't remember who narrated it, but it was so funny. So yeah, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. It's just, it's not bad. It's just a bit forgettable for me overall. So that's why it's so low. And then the last one we're going to bring up today at number 71. It's this little fella. The Eyes of the Dragon. This is a YA fantasy that Stephen King wrote for his daughter, which is really sweet. So obviously when she was younger, and it's sort of in the Dark Tower realm, as in sort of alternate versions of some of the characters that we know and love. It's about 2 brothers who are princes, and their father, the king, dies, and the one that expects to take the throne, things go badly for him, and the other one has to step up. And you know, there's a whole lot of trickery and literal wizardry and scheming and all of that good stuff. It's just sort of low on my list because I'm not a huge YA reader, and there is some YA books I really enjoy, but they tend to be more horror or like dystopian. This isn't really my bag, but I enjoyed it while I was reading it. I think this is about an average, how many pages? It's about 400 pages, just over, but I do think it could have been cut in half, if I'm being completely honest, just condensed a little bit, and it would have just been like a punchier read. But yeah, when we get into the next video, like that's basically the books that I just don't like very much, and then we're getting the next video will start with books that I do like. Let me know if any of these are in your bottom 7 or 10, whatever. I would be really interested to know if any of these are in your top 10. I would love to talk to you if that's the case, because yeah, it's so fun talking about Stephen King, especially when you've got like massive differences of opinion. So yeah, I would love to know if any of these are in your favorites. Let me know. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you next time, and thanks for hanging out with me.